Welcome to Just Minding My Business Media, where you get information that you can use. I'm your host, Ida Crawford. But just a reminder, please subscribe to Just Minding My Business here on on my YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcasts. So grab your tablet, notebook, pen, whatever you use, and get ready for information that you can use. I am so happy to bring to you today, all the way from Australia, Rod Moynihan. And Rod is a seasoned professional with extensive experience spanning over 20 years in the technology sector, with a background encompassing renowned companies such as Zendesk, Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, to name a few. Rod has honed his skills in navigating the complexities of the industry. Rod's expertise lies in executing strategies through both direct and indirect channels, leading organizational transformations and possessing deep market knowledge. Welcome, Rod. I really
It's an
appreciate you
absolute.
being here. And tell us a little bit about your company.
Thank you, Ida. Firstly, great to be here. And yes, all the way from down under, as some might know us, Australia. So I've got a pretty lengthy history and in the tech industry, spanning all the way back to 1997. But if we fast forward to today, back in 2020, I came in as a director and controlling shareholder of a business called BAC in 2020. At that stage, BAC was exclusively focused on the transformational works around a number of software platforms such as Salesforce, such as Sugar CRM and Microsoft Dynamics.
Mhm.
We fast forward to 2024 today, some of those relationships, or most of those relationships, don't exist anymore. And we've repurposed the business to be exclusively focused on what we call low-code, no-code software partners, but also drawing on our deep professional services background as an organization to help businesses transform, to harness those platforms those technology platforms we now work with.
Yes, yes. And in your work, do you find um a little resistance sometimes about moving to the next level in technology, or fear, I should say?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good question because we historically look at organizations, small, medium, large, they all have their different challenges and barriers for transformation and change. But a lot of the common themes that we would have seen back in the 2000s and even emerging, into the early 2010s would have been the effort and cost and time to derive value from executing such pervasive transformation programs. I think if we fast forward and keep using that word, but if we uh, time travel from 2010 to now, we've seen the emergence of platforms, a proliferation again of new kind of platforms coming into the market. And what we're also seeing, obviously, is the emergence of AI now drawing on, both democratized data and proprietary data that organizations contain themselves. And so if we look at this in terms of platforms that are now low code, no code as we know them, but extensively means that they're easier to configure and easier to deploy and faster time to value. But if we then look at the fact that we can now contain data and get external data and use AI to make smart decisions for us, we're even accelerating the value that we're getting from these platforms. There are still some common themes that will never change in getting value, but I'm happy to talk about those if you want to. But
Oh,
like definitely from a
absolutely.
technology platform perspective, we've definitely seen a proliferation of easier, faster time to value platforms coming in. And from a domain perspective, that covers the whole thing, whether or not it's logistics, whether or not it's sales and marketing, whether or not it's finance, whether or not it's even reporting. The platforms now are certainly getting easier to deploy and faster time to value.
And that's so true because I've been in the computer world for over 30 years myself. And I've been in, when new software comes in, the planning, the testing, the all these different things, it would take years sometimes to get the new software in place.
Well, you mentioned one really interesting word there, which I think I highlighted that there are some themes that have not changed, no matter whether or not you were rolling out SAP or Oracle or even some of the defunct products now like JD Edwards and PeopleSoft back in the day.
Mhm.
Uh, Fast forward to today, whether or not it's Zendesk, it's HubSpot, it's Zoho, it's NetSuite. What
Yeah.
hasn't changed is what you just said then is the planning program. And certainly that's where I see fail points in organizations, whether or not, it was 1997 or it's 2024. There, from my perspective, that's where the fail points are. I often say that technology is just kind of like the hull of a ship, right? It's this thing that holds you above the water. It's what you build on the hull and plan to build on the hull that actually orchestrates what sort of ship you want. You might want an icebreaker, but if you don't plan what you need for an
Yes.
icebreaker, you won't get through the ice. You might need a cargo ship. You might need a rescue ship. Who knows? But the hull, the platform is just the hull. You need to plan what you build on that to orchestrate how you get from port to destination. And if you don't plan and architect that planning right, doesn't matter what the platform is, you're highly likely to fail, low adoption, and possibly a waste of money.
Very, very so very true
Mm.
because one of the things, in my years in the business was getting with the user and really defining what is it that you want this to do. That,
Correct, correct.
because you need to know all of that first.
Well, software, I mean, there's this kind of natural tension that exists in a kind of triangulated manner in the software or technology acquisition world. Vendors are exclusively driven by month on quarter revenue and month on quarter sales. And, if you're buying off a software vendor, it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or whoever else,
Right.
Salesforce, you're going to be in a vacuum of a sales process that's going to pressurize you to make quick decisions because they've got quotas to retire, revenue to hit, all
Mhm.
sorts of things. The triangulation of that pressure is then, so you've got the vendor or vendors, you could be talking to multiple, you've got the buyer who's managing a vastly different risk profile than the vendor. And then you've got the service provider who's like a BAC or an Accenture or someone who's going to come in and have to bring that promise to life, implement it, right? And often, as you just said there, in that triangulation, again, a fail point around the planning is containing the user, getting the user into the change program, getting the user
Yes.
into the requirements gathering program. Because again, and I've struggled with this all these years. I mean, I led some pretty big software companies in region, and I struggled a little bit around how, particularly the software vendors, have struggled to understand that aspect of the triangulation of that risk model. That in the
Mhm.
center of that is going to be the user, and if we get the user in there correctly, the systems integrator or the BAC or the Accenture, whoever it might, has clear understanding of what they're going to do. The
Right.
buyer has all the user requirements, so they're managing their risk profile and their due diligence better. And for the software vendor, they're highly likely to get a stickier position
Mhm.
and drive a fast and get renewal on renewal, right? Because if adoption isn't there, people aren't using the platform. Unfortunately, they either leave, and then that's in the subscription world we live now. That optionality is there that you can swap in and out of a subscription. And yeah, so the user is central to this. And if you
Yes.
work with the right sort of vendors or wherever, and they have the right sort of methodologies to work with you up front to build those requirements, it's going to actually minimize that risk and again, create a greater success within that triangulation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have really touched on a very, very important piece of the puzzle. The people that's going to be using it, they're going to tell you whether it's going to work or not.
Well, what's the point of adjusting software platforms or creating a whole new procedural manner that you then embed into a software platform if it's not what the users want?
Right, absolutely. We're going
You
to
know,
meet the real needs of the company.
and you know what, Ida, if you want to take it to a next level, we can move it from triangulation to square because there's another point in there. If you really, really, depending on whether or not you're a B2C or a B2B business, but if you're a B2C business, there's actually a square, and that's the customer.
Yes.
So you'll have vendor, your service provider, you'll have yourself as a client, and then you'll have a customer. So I've worked with a lot of companies that are B2C, e-commerce type companies, for example, retailers. And when we do planning with them, we actually get them to actually go and work through the consumer journey from the consumer's eyes. And then
Yes.
we embed the consumer journey preferences into the design parameters that we're bringing to life, whether or not it's a service or support requirement and how you come in through a help desk, whether or not it's an acquisition process through a cart, whether or not it's through an authenticated portal, potentially buying things unique to yourself. If you can get that consumer lens as well, all of a sudden you're building a much more stable environment in a kind of like a square requirements gathering.
Yes, yes, indeed. Wow.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if companies want to work with you, how do they contact you?
Well, if they're my email's here, so or they can go to our bac.co. That will allow them to put some information in.
Mhm.
Ideally, we're a very how should I say we're a client. We're quite client intense, and what that means is those things I was just talking about there. We invest a lot of time up front, usually in a non-chargeable position to help customers kind of manage their risk, do the due diligence appropriately.
Mhm.
As much as we work with software companies, Ida, the reason we do that is because, to my way of thinking, software is an end state. It's not a start state. And what I mean by that is your start state, is we mentioned before, is planning, understanding your processes. What we challenge customers with when we talk to them, Ida, is, what are the mandatory requirements that your business must have? So, for example, how do you sell your product and what are the processes involved in it? So if you're a financial institution, as you know, you've worked there,
Mhm.
selling lending products that might be regulated, there are mandatory requirements in the sales process to actually sell someone a regulated lending product. We have to map those, and we have to understand those. But then we'll look outside that and we say, well, what do you do today that we can improve from a procedural or a process perspective? So
Mhm.
we'll help design better processes with them because we bring a lot of domain knowledge, not just technology knowledge. Once
Mhm.
we've articulated that with a client, we can then start looking at how the technology that they have today we can harness. How do we maximize that or sweat the asset, as people might say sometimes?
Mhm.
Or what do we got to do to introduce new things that will actually enhance those new procedures and processes and make it more efficient or more effective or a better customer experience or a better employee experience or whatever it might be?
Mhm.
So from a BAC standpoint, the experience you would have with us is a highly intensive experience of getting deep under the covers up front to manage your risk, our risk, and obviously our technology partners' risk to make sure that we're architecting the best outcome before we decide to go ahead.
And that makes perfectly great sense. And
Yeah.
you'd be surprised how many companies don't think like that. They get a little piece of the puzzle. Oh, this is going to work. But they don't really, then once it's implemented or put into production, it doesn't work.
Correct. Well, I, unfortunately, I mean, there's a couple of really interesting things that have happened in the marketplace. I mean, the balance of power in terms of the consumer's awareness of what they're buying is definitely better. Used to be that if you wanted to go and buy, let's say, Salesforce or HubSpot or something like that, you
Yes.
would have to go there, meet with them, multiple meetings, they'd demo to you, they'd show you. It's kind of almost it's magical. You're kind of seeing things as it emerges, and they're kind of telling you what you need. The balance of power in terms of that investigation shifted very much in favor of the buyer because the arsenal of digital content that's available now online has accelerated and lifted
Yes.
the knowledge that a buyer can get before they even engage.
Hmm.
Um, but there is still, just to your point there, to me, again, a common theme where errors still maintain is technology is on its own is not going to solve your problems. You have to work, as I said before, go through and actually do the process design of the things that are your processes that you need to architect that are mandatory or new, and then retrofit that within the technology platform or platforms of choice that you're going to use. And they'll have all their own nuances of whether or not how they will work, right?
Yes, yes. So my next question involves AI. So
Yeah.
how can businesses align their revenue operations with AI for growth?
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of well, first and foremost, the AI is still in its infantile stages. Its
Yes.
proliferation of growth is exponential, however. I was actually having a meeting last week with someone who's supporting one of the big four at the moment, big four consulting companies, helping them, or actually spearheading their global AI strategy, both in terms of internally how they're going to use AI to make them more efficient and more productive, and secondly, and not surprisingly, how is AI going to diminish their current offerings that are people-led?
Mm.
Because what that individual said to me, which was quite interesting, was he's traveled the world and met Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all their heads of AI. What he said to me was, we are in the infantile stages, but AI is proliferating its neural capability, meaning its growth,
Mm-hmm.
16x every 3 months.
Mm.
So yes, we are infantile, but its magnitude of growth and the speed of the impact it's going to have is quite
Yes.
um, extraordinary. So my opening comment would be around AI. How's it going to help businesses? Is start playing with it. That would be my first recommendation. Start tinkering with it, whether or not it's how you articulate an email or write an email better and get greater tonality, or you
Uh,
build an email that's appropriate for the persona that you're trying to address, all the way through to using content creation now inside your landing pages, your website, or your marketing materials. There's some great tools out there. Actually, more than great tools. There's hundreds of
yes.
tools out there
Yes,
right
it
now.
is.
Um, but we're also seeing some really, really smart things in terms of sales orchestration, as you said, in terms of revenue operations. So if I just hone in on products such as HubSpot, which we partner with, HubSpot now is actually embedding AI into the channels of communication, all activities inside your prospect or your customer. So it can actually take voice recordings and interpret that and automatically embed next best steps for you. You can actually embed that into a sales methodology. It's actually smart enough now that it's actually tracking what your buyers are doing around content and actually telling you when you should be reaching out to them and what you should be reaching out to them for.
Wow.
So when we start thinking about efficiency and productivity in the workplace, what that's actually doing is freeing up time, but it's also giving you smarter decisions that are more tailored for a better customer interaction, which hopefully at the end of the day should shorten your sales cycles or potentially give a better customer experience because you're more targeted based on what they're doing. If we
Yeah.
see we can fast forward this all the way through the whole revenue chain as well as we like. But there's a couple of very, very simple things that are available today that people can actually start using.
Yes, and I think that's going to be really critical. My next question for you is maintaining authenticity when you are implementing, personalizing, and scaling things like that. How do you keep that authentic aura? I'm gonna say.
Yeah, no, you've tapped into something very, very close to my heart. I'm in my 26th year in the industry, and when I started out, we didn't have the tools we have today, and every meeting was, I can remember being in my car driving from meeting to meeting to meeting, being in, I didn't have Google Maps trying to work out where I was going to be, working out the timing, and you know, so for me, authenticity starts with a couple of things. We can in the workplace, I could talk about it, but I'll talk about it more in terms of your customer and prospect engagement and your external interactions. I think the first thing about authenticity is just everyone uses this, but just general curiosity about people. Like, if you're generally interested in people, that'll come out in questioning. It'll come out in active listening. It'll come out in your non-verbals as well. Just generally how you're with people. That is challenged today when we sit in an environment like we are now that is virtual. Um, but I think also authenticity is also probably a bit of a lost skill right now because, maybe I'm going to shoot myself in the foot around the AI piece, but like if our decisions are now all being orchestrated and given to us by a machine, where does that leave the authentic self in that? So,
Yes.
so I think I mentor a couple of people and I canvass them regularly to say, get in front of people, before you get in front of someone, learn a little bit about them. So when you turn up, you're interested and you know a bit about them.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of networking, and every day I leave time in my day to either call someone, email someone, try to just reach out to someone. And I always reach out with a view that I want to put in, not get back. And if I'm putting in, people will also feel that authentic self. I think the good news about the workplace that we work in today is a lot of the hierarchical barriers have been broken down. So
Yes.
when I started working, I'm going to talk about authenticity in the workplace. When I started working, it was turn up, shut up, do your job, first in, last out, take on every big challenge, almost like, the royal family's motto, don't complain, don't explain, just turn up, don't complain, do your job. If
That's
you work till 3 in the morning, you wouldn't tell anyone, you delivered it and, got it done. I think those hierarchy and barriers in the workplace have been really broken down, and there seems to be workplaces have become, in some ways a lot more casual the way that we interact and the way we work. And I think that brings out a lot of the authenticity in people because they feel less threatened by the hierarchy or less threatened by the nuances of how you used to have to behave in a workplace. Now, there are rules to behavior. Yes, I get that. You can't step over certain boundaries.
absolutely.
I do feel that people are more genuinely themselves in the workplace now, which I like.
I
Yeah.
like that a lot too because I'm gonna be who I am, and I don't feel comfortable trying to do anything else.
No, no.
So
So when that scaling piece, I think I've gone into companies when there were 10 people, and when I left there was 1,000. And I've been in leadership roles when I went in there was no one, and when I left there was 180. And you know as you build businesses and scale, one of the great challenges for every company is how do you maintain those values, that culture that was there in the beginning, and again spread that across the whole business as it gets bigger and business units get formed and individual and collective accountabilities and targets are different. So how do you continuously integrate that across a business as you grow is a challenge, right? And
yes.
um, alignment is the only word, and then execution of alignment is probably the hardest thing to do.
Yes, yes, it is. Wow.
Mm.
This has been very interesting, Rod. So again, how do companies connect with you for your services?
Yep. So feel free to email me at what is my email? Moynihan at bacpartners.com.au. I'll go to bac.co and fill out the inquiry form, or my phone number's there, which is a +61, which is the Australian area code. With my cell number there, or connect with me on LinkedIn at Rodney Moynihan.
Yeah.
So would love to hear from anyone, any comments, challenge it. Tell me I've got rocks in my head or I got it all wrong, or help me learn some more and give me some better advice. Always open to it.
Yeah. So thank you so much for getting up so early to meet with us and share your knowledge and expertise with my audience and me. We really appreciate it because I know Australia and East Coast is like night and day, literally.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Ida, and great questions. And it was great to have the opportunity to share with your audience.
Absolutely.